We are almost done with our quadratics. The next two videos are going to be about the quadratic formula. Okay, so the quadratic formula is our other way of solving quadratics, and it works every single time. So if all else fails, you can use the quadratic formula. Okay, now to do the quadratic formula, it does have to be in standard form, and you do have to make sure that you have the x squared first, then the x, then your constant. Okay, now your quadratic formula is one big fraction. So it's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, you got to have it memorized. Now this b squared minus 4ac is something called the discriminant. It tells you a lot about a quadratic, but we're not going to focus on it. We're just going to work on solving. Okay, so I'm going to sound really silly real quick, but there is a way of memorizing this quadratic formula. And it's a song. You guys know the Frere Jacques song? The Frere Jacques, Frere Jacques, okay? I'm going to sound super silly, especially because I'm sitting here by myself singing this song. But I learned this song a really long time ago when I was in like 8th grade. And I never forgot the quadratic formula, okay? And it works every single time. So that's important to have it memorized and have it in your head so that if you ever have to solve a quadratic, which it's going to come up again in the rest of your math classes until you graduate high school, and it works every time, okay? So the song goes, negative b, plus or minus square root, b squared minus 4ac, b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a, all over 2a. Silly, I know. Play it again if you need to, but it's just reading this formula out, right? And it's just a way of helping you memorize your quadratic formula. Now, the a's, b's, and c's are talking about this a, b, and c. There are no x's in your quadratic formula because we're saying x equals. So the a, b, and c are only the coefficients. No x's in here, right? So for the first one, all right, the first thing I'm going to do is make sure it's set equal to 0, make sure it's in order. So it is set equal to 0, and it is in order. And I am switching variables in there, so we'll call that one an x. Don't know what happened. All right, so I have x squared minus 5x minus 14. So the first thing I'm going to do is figure out my a, b, and c. And I'm going to use some colors for you. My a is the coefficient out front in front of the x squared, so nothing's written there, so that means my a is a 1. My b is in front of the x term, and that's going to be a negative 5. Keep the signs. All right, and different color. I'll use purple. C is the constant that doesn't have a variable, so that's negative 14. So when I want to solve, remember I'm solving for x, so we got x equals, okay, and then I got this big fraction in here. All right, I'm going to start with negative b. So I have negative, right, b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So all I did was put parentheses everywhere I have to plug something in. Now it's just a matter of plugging in. So first I have negative b, so my b was a negative 5. Then I have b squared minus 4 times a times c. So a was 1. C was negative 14, right? And then all over 2a. And then we just simplify, right? If it wants you to give a decimal, you can go ahead and type all of that into the calculator. But usually it wants it simplified and exact, so you're not plugging it in. Negative 5 is a positive. So I have 5 plus or minus. 5 squared is 25. Okay, 4 times 1 is 4, and then 4 times 14 is 56. And I have a negative times a negative, so that's actually going to be a plus 56. And then 2 times 1 is 2, so we'll just leave a 2 on the bottom. 25 plus 56 is 81. Okay, and I'm totally going to run out of room. The square root of 81 is 9. So I can make this become 5 plus or minus 9 over 2. Okay, just like we did with completing the square. If I can get rid of my radical, I need to go ahead and simplify all the way and get down to 2 numbers. So that means there's this plus or minus, so I'm going to have a plus, and then I'm going to have a minus. So I have 5 plus 9, which is 14, divided by 2 is 7. 5 minus 9 is negative 4, divided by 2 is negative 2. So those are my two answers. All right, for number 2, I'm going to start by identifying my A, B, and C. I'm going to keep it the same color this time. So A is 2. I'm going to write that above it, save some room. My B is a negative 3, and my C is a negative 5. All right, so I've got negative B plus or minus square root B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. So my B is negative 3. My A is 2, my C is negative 5, A is 2. Let me simplify. Negative negative 3 is a positive 3. Negative 3 squared is 9. 4 times 2 is 8, times 5 is 40. And again, I have two negatives, so that's going to make a positive. All over 2 times 2, which is 4. 9 plus 40 is 49. And the square root of 49 is 7. So we get 3 plus or minus 7 over 4. And again, I got rid of my radical, so I've got to simplify. So I'm going to have a 3 plus 7 over 4 and a 3 minus 7 over 4. 3 plus 7 is 10. So I get 10 over 4, which I can simplify to 5 over 2. 3 minus 7 is negative 4. Negative 4 over 4, negative 1. All right, and we'll use a different color. I've got to first get it in standard form, so I'm going to start by adding that 7 over, right? And I'm going to do it up here because I know I'm short on space. So I have 2x squared plus 9x plus 7 equals 0. You've got to get it in standard form before you can pick your A, B, and C. Then my A is 2, my B is 9, and my C is 7. All right, so I've got negative B plus or minus square root B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. So my B is 9, my A is 2, my C is 7, A is 2. So negative 9 is just negative 9. 9 squared is 81. 4 times 2 is 8, and then 8 times 7 is 56. 56. And I only have that one negative, so it's not going to change. It's going to stay a minus sign. All right, and then 2 times 2 is 4. So then 81 minus 56, well, let's see, is 25. So we have negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 25 over 4. And 25 is a perfect square, so I have negative 9 plus or minus 5 over 4. All right, then we can break it apart. So I have negative 9 plus 5 over 4 and negative 9 minus 5 over 4. Okay, negative 9 plus 5 is 4. Divided by 4 is positive 1. Ooh, positive 1. Nope, I'm wrong. Negative 9 plus 5 is negative 4. Negative 4 divided by 4 is negative 1. I had it right the first time. Negative 9 minus 5 is negative 14. So negative 14 is not divisible by 4, but I can simplify to negative 7 over 2. Fractions are okay. There's nothing wrong with fractions. Okay, for number 4, I've got 5x squared minus 80, so I got to get that 80 on the other side, so I'm going to subtract it. Okay, and then this one looks weird. I don't have an x term, right? Doesn't mean I can't do quadratic formula. Just start off by labeling A, B, and C. So A is in front of the x squared, so that's going to be a 5. B is in front of the x, but I don't have an x term, so B is 0. Okay, and then C is the one that doesn't have anything, so that's a negative 80. So we got negative B plus or minus square root B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. My B is 0, 0, and then my A is 5. Oh, that's a 2A, parentheses. My C is a negative 80, and my A is 5. Well, negative 0, that's just 0, so I don't even have to write that. We can just say plus or minus, but I'll leave it just so it looks a little nicer. All right, well, 0 squared is 0. Okay, 4 times 5 times 80, I'm going to type that in, is 1,600. And I have 2 negatives, so that's going to be a positive. And that's over 2 times 5, 10. All right, well, this becomes 0 plus or minus the square root of 1,600 over 10. Okay, the square root of 1,600 is 40. And then, make sure I have room. So I have 0 plus or minus 40 over 10. And now I can break that apart. I'm going to come up. So I'm going to have a 0 plus 40 over 10. And then I'm going to have a 0 minus 40 over 10. So that's 40 divided by 10, which is 4. And that's negative 40 divided by 10, which is negative 4. Okay, so it's okay if you're missing one. You just put in a 0 for that value. And our last one. All right, I need to set it equal to 0, so I've got to add that 10 over. So I'm going to have 2x squared minus 7x. Negative 13 plus 10 is negative 3. My a is 2, b is negative 7, c is negative 3. You've got to set it equal to 0 before you pick a, b, and c. All right, then I'm just going to plug in negative b plus or minus, square root, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so my b is negative 7, a is 2, negative 3, and 2. All right, so we've got positive 7 plus or minus the square root. Negative 7 squared is 49. 4 times 2 is 8, times 3 is 24, and I have 2 negatives, so that's a plus. All right, 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, now 49 plus 24 gives us 73. So we have 7 plus or minus the square root of 73 over 4. Okay, 73 is prime. There's nothing that goes into 73, which means I can't break it down, and I can't get rid of my radical, so I stop here. And that's my answer. Okay, so if you can get rid of the radical, just like with completing the square, go ahead and find your individual x values. If you can't, simplify where you can. We can't here. Try to make your factor tree, but 73 is prime. And then leave it. That's as far as we can go.